His Excellency Ambassador Sato, Ambassador of Japan to Israel, Professor Reuven Amitai, Dean of the Faculty of Humanities at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, dear professors, colleagues, honorable guests, and students. Welcome to the formal inauguration ceremony of the Israeli Association for Japanese Studies, which was established less than 3 months ago in a meeting of about 100 scholars and students in Tel Aviv. The meeting took place exactly in February 26, which is a very, I would say, significant day in the life of every historian of modern Japan, especially of Professor Ben-Ami Shiloni, who wrote his PhD on this. We have special guests joining us to this ceremony. We have, of course, Professor Sheldon Garon of Princeton University, who might want to join our discussion later on. And we have Mr. Hara Hideki, Director of the Middle East and Africa Section, Japanese Studies and Intellectual Exchange Department, the Japan Foundation, who came especially for this event. We also have, followingly, a special panel on Japanese studies in Israel, headed by the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, Professor Reuven Amitai, and with speakers from the 3 major universities that offer comprehensive BA and MA programs in Japanese studies, Professor Ben-Ami Shiloni of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Professor Yaakov Raz of Tel Aviv University, and Professor Rotem Kovner of Haifa University. Japanese studies and East Asian studies in general have gone a long way in the past few decades to become one of the most thriving fields in the faculties of humanities and social sciences in Israel. From the modest beginning of the Department of Chinese and Japanese Studies established at the Hebrew University in the early 60s, the field has dramatically expanded over the past 15 years to include 3 major departments of Asian or East Asian studies at the universities, along with a few other universities and colleges throughout Israel, which offer some kind of Japanese studies related courses. Extraordinary high enrollment figures in these departments and programs testify to their unprecedented popularity among young Israelis. In the field of Japanese studies, compared with the population size, Israel might have one of the world's highest rates of researchers and students studying about Japan. We are talking about more than 30 professional scholars who hold a PhD in Japanese studies or in other disciplines with a research focus on Japan, and more than 250 students who major in Japanese studies within the Department of East Asian or Asian Studies. The Israeli Association for Japanese Studies, IAJS, is a non-profit organization which aims to address the growing academic interest in Japan in the field of Japanese studies and the need for better coordination among the various researchers and academic institutions working in the field. IAJS seeks to encourage Japanese-related research and dialogue in Israel, promote Japanese language teaching, organize symposium, workshops, and conferences in the field of Japanese studies, and advance the academic ties and collaborations with Japanese studies associations and academic institutions abroad. Most importantly, it wishes to maintain a lively community in the field of Japanese studies in Israel. The association is open to researchers, students, and anyone with interest in Japanese studies and language. I would like to encourage you all to register, if you haven't not done so, at the registration desk, which will be available soon after this ceremony and during all day tomorrow. Before we'll proceed to the round table discussion, which is not so round table, but it's the concept of round table. I would like to invite Mr. Hara of the Japan Foundation to offer a few words of greetings. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Professor Matskin, for a great introduction. And His Excellency Ambassador Sato and Professor Amitai, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a privilege for me and the Japan Foundation to be a part of such an important initiative of Israeli scholars of Japan to get together regularly and exchange their ideas and insights on Japan. I myself have been with the foundation for over 20 years now, and mostly following the trajectory of the Japanese studies all over the world, or for that matter, the area studies in general across the world. And there is no doubt that eccentricity was, and still is to some extent, a primary driver for any area studies. But looking back, my job at the foundation has always been to mitigate the eccentric image of our nation and portray Japan as a normal country or sharing common social values and social issues with other nations and having a diverse culture inside, just like any other country. In the aftermath of the unprecedented disasters last year, however, there has been a strong temptation, once again on the part of the media or at some corners of the academia, to paint the Japanese nation as distinctly, uniquely calm, patient, and resilient in the face of crisis. While it's not necessarily unpleasant for anybody to be described as such, what I saw and heard and experienced in Tohoku after the disaster categorically sort of disqualifies this simple description. Yes, many people were calm, but that was because they were too exhausted or they are too much in pain. And indeed, after a while, their anger and frustration began to emerge, maybe not in the form of looting or violence, but in many other forms. The doubt over the myth of the sort of a Japan exclusive cultural traits has been brought up time and time again during the sessions today. I, for one, who has been spending most of my professional career fighting off this myth, would like to ask you, the Japan specialists in Israel, join forces with us trying to uncover commonalities and universalities in Japanese culture. Indeed, if you go to the disaster-hit regions in Tohoku, you'll be able to observe so many young volunteers or NPO leaders trying to regain such universal virtues as humanity, dignity, human dignity, and happiness. Not only for the disaster victims, but also for themselves and millions of others in his or her generations who have been looking for ways to take an exit from a rat race in cities and become somebody in society. I'm not saying this because it is good for Japan's diplomatic image, but putting things that are said to be Japanese in a global perspective can open up vast opportunities for new types of dialogues. The two phrases, Japan is unique and Japan is inferior, have one thing in common. It kills a conversation. No nation can afford stopping conversations with other nations now. So once again, congratulations on the creation of another channel of conversation between the two countries. I hope there will be more opportunities for collaboration between the Japan Foundation and the Israeli scholars in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Good evening to all. I'd like to welcome again His Excellency the Ambassador, our guest from the Japanese Embassy, Professor Garon, Mr. Hara Hideki, and all of our friends and guests from the Hebrew University, from the other universities here this evening. I want to congratulate everybody about the foundation of the new Israeli Society for Japanese Studies. I would say that the formation of an organization like that is both indicative, it's symbolic, and symptomatic of an important change, of a coalescing crystallization of a community of scholars of Japan, its culture, its history, its language, its literature in Israel. And so it's a sign of maturity on the one hand. On the other hand, it obviously is going to accelerate, and it's going to serve as a catalyst for further investigation and development of this profession. This profession is interesting. How do we define it? Is it part of East Asian studies? Obviously, but that's not enough. How is it connected to the humanities and the social sciences? It's a question that affects all of us in area studies. How much is Middle Eastern studies or Japanese studies or Asian studies or South American studies or whatever? How much are they, what kind of discipline is it? How does it connect with other disciplines such as history and literature and language and the social sciences, etc.? I'm maybe one of the few people here. I'm probably the only person in the room who's not connected, either not from East Asia and not connected to East Asian studies, as far as I can tell. I think the majority of you are connected in some form or another, either to Japan or to Japanese studies. My own area of expertise is the Middle East, particularly the people of Central Asia coming into the Middle East. But I've been involved for several years now, not only as dean in administration and thinking about some of the issues that I think some of the people here are thinking about, certainly my colleagues to my left, about how do we teach the culture, history, language, society of not our own, basically. Even somebody in the Middle East teaching the culture of the Arabs and the Turks and the Persians, and obviously the concerns in the sense that similar to those trying to teach the cultures of East Asia. So some of the questions that I have, I think I have about myself and to my own colleagues close to home, I can probably ask my colleagues here. Again, what is the nature of the discipline? How does it connect to the larger discipline of Asian studies? How about language training? How much language training and how, when and how? How much in the BA? How much in the MA? How do we send people abroad? How do we send people abroad? What exactly is the amount of teaching, and how do we teach properly? And what do we expect from our students at different levels? How much of the traditional culture and history do we teach, as opposed to more modern concerns such as society and anthropology and political science and international relations and contemporary cultural concerns? What is the exact combination? And again, what are our expectations of our students at different levels? And what do we do with the students? It's clear that the vast majority of our students will not turn into professors. So how do we train them? What do we expect from them? What do we expect when they finish their BA? How much other things do we expect? What is the nature of their more general, their general education combined with, of course, their specialization in Japanese studies or East Asian studies or whatever? So these are questions that I ask myself, one, with regard to my own concerns of closer to home, two, as an academic administrator, at least for the time being. I can ask my colleagues what do they think about these matters. And I think that I'm sure that other people are asking these questions too, and I think we can ask them this evening. I also think, and perhaps the colleagues here will want to talk first, or at least about what's going on at their own university. And I think all of us can learn from other universities. Each of us has a slightly different academic profile. There's a lot of cooperation, certainly in this field. There's cooperation in the humanities across Israel in general. The deans of all 5 research universities, the deans of humanities, meet on a regular basis. I have to note that some of you are from Haifa, and of course the fact that 2 people named Reuven must be important. Certainly to find somebody else with that name is always very satisfying. 3 of the deans are scholars of the Middle East, and 3 of us come from English-speaking countries. So what else that's also the basis of much cooperation. But that being said, we have obviously major concerns, so we meet on a regular basis and we talk. And among the things that we talk about are Asian studies and Japanese studies too. So there is cooperation. I won't deny that occasionally there's a little bit of competition, just a little bit, but mostly cooperation, and as we say in Hebrew, lots of firgun. I will introduce the 3 speakers very, very briefly. I'm sure all of you know all of the speakers, but In case not, I will just say a few words about each of them. And then in the order that I've given the names, we'll give each of them about 10 minutes to talk about maybe a bit about their university and how they see the teaching of Japanese studies in their universities and perhaps in some of the wider context. And then we'll give each of them 2 or 3 minutes to respond to the initial comments, and then we'll open up the floor. And even though it's not really a round table, it's metaphorically a round table, of course. So we'll start with Professor Ben-Ami Sheldon, who is, of course, known to all of us as historian of the study of Japanese history here in Israel. And he is now the honorary president of the Israeli Association of Japanese Studies. Of course, I will just mention that many books, both in in 3 languages at least, in English, in Hebrew, and of course in Japanese. And he has been awarded a number of awards and recognition for teaching, for excellence in teaching. In 2000, the Japanese emperor bestowed on him the Order of the Sacred Treasure, Gold and Silver Star. In 2007, an international conference was held in honor of him at his retirement. And in October 2010, he was awarded the Japan Foundation Award for that year. He was the first Israeli to receive it and was granted an audience with the Emperor and Empress of Japan. A great honor. Okay. That's certainly well deserved. Next is Professor Yaakov Raz, who is from Tel Aviv University, professor in the Department of East Asian Studies. He's a lecturer, researcher, and author on various topics of Japanese culture, philosophy, aesthetics, poetry, literature, and anthropology, as well as on subjects of Buddhism and Chinese and Japanese Zen Buddhism. And also Professor Raz has published many books and articles on these subjects. And finally, Professor Reuven Kovner from Haifa, from the University of Haifa, is professor of Japanese history there. And his research has focused on wartime behavior and attitudes in modern Japan, as well as the racial nexus between Japan and the West since the 16th century. And he has also several books, which I will not go into now, but there are many books. So we have, between the 3 of them, many books in a number of languages, which cover mostly, but not only, the history, culture, and society of modern Japan. So without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Ben-Ami Sheldon to come up and say a few words, about 10 minutes altogether, and then we'll continue on.
Thank you, Reuven, for your introduction. As I'm a historian, I'll maybe tell you the history of the Department of Japanese Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, because the Hebrew University of Jerusalem was the first university in Israel to establish Japanese studies. When I was a graduate student at this university in the early 60s, before many of you were born maybe, I already took courses in Japanese subjects. One was Japanese religion by Professor Wroblewski. One was Japanese history by Meron Mezzini.
I was born already.
He's here. He's here. And by Professor Schifrin, who was a specialist on China, but he also offered courses on China and Japan. In 1965, Avram Altman returned from Princeton with a PhD from Princeton, and he joined the department and started teaching Japanese language. In 1969, the Department of Chinese and Japanese Studies was established. Later it was changed to the Department of East Asian Studies, and soon it will be called Department of Asian Studies, because Indian studies are joining us, our department. In 1971, I returned from Princeton, again from Princeton, with a PhD from there, and joined the department. And so there was a Princeton input into the beginning of this department, and it's very symbolic that Professor Sheldon Garon from Princeton is the keynote speaker at our conference. So you think things, there's no chance things are, ordered from above that this will be so. Then Ehud Harari joined us in 1975 in Japanese politics, and actually we emphasized not one thing, but many things. We emphasized language, which was always very important. We emphasized history, culture, politics. You can say we're an interdisciplinary department. And we were fortunate to have very good teachers in Japanese one of our teachers of Japanese, you wouldn't believe, those who don't know, became the Polish ambassador to Japan. Would you imagine? A nice Jewish boy teaching Japanese at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, becoming the Polish ambassador to Japan for 5 years. And he was an ambassador who spoke fluent Japanese because he taught Japanese literature at the University of Warsaw. He's now in Poland. In the 1980s, we started growing. We used to be a very small department, very intimate. Everyone knew everyone else, students. We started growing and growing and growing. We became the second largest department, the Faculty of Humanities. And in the late 1980s, my class, Introduction to Japanese History and Culture, had 680 registered students. 1 year, one class. So it was a phenomenal growth. Many of the people here were either students at our department or taught at our department. And so we are very proud of all of them. And many people ask us why so many students come to study Japanese studies at the time. And I think because we offered many things that students were looking for. There was a traditional culture of Japan. Zen was popular. We had a Zen expert, Professor Yaakov Raz. Zen was very popular. Japanese martial arts were popular. Japanese culture, literature, but also modern Japan. Very popular. It was a time that Japan was booming, you know, and Japan was a model for the world, and people just wanted to learn the secret of Japan. And we were fortunate to be also helped by the Hebrew University, by Truman Institute, which is part of the university, but enabled research, Japanese government, the Japanese embassy, Japanese Ministry of Education, Monbusho, now called Monkasho. Every year, our students receive scholarships to go to Japan. Most of Japanese scholars now in Israel have started their career in Japanese studies by receiving a scholarship from the Monbusho, now called Monkasho scholarship, which I think is a great contribution. Without that, we wouldn't have now in Israel the Japanese studies as it is today. And of course the Japan Foundation, which helped in research, conferences. So I want to thank very much Ambassador Sato of the Japanese Embassy as a representative of the Japanese government, and Mrs. Hara, Mr. Shimane, who represent the Japanese Japan Foundation here. They were really very helpful to us. And in time, our success, like any success, created a wish of other universities also to open Japanese studies. So Tel Aviv was the second one to open Japanese studies, and then Haifa University too. And it was mentioned there's some competition. Of course, there's always some competition, but we are very happy that this department was established because many of the teachers were former students of our department, and also now there were more jobs for people in Japanese studies that graduate Japanese studies. And I think even if there's some competition is very good. So we should compete, but we always, all of us are friends with each other, which I think is still very nice. Not in every field, academic field, people are friends, as our dean knows very well. Now, I'm glad to see that all the people who were at that time and before and now, they're still all around us. So I'm very happy about that. But most of the first, all of the first generation have retired already. And we are again very fortunate to have young people, excellent young people, joining our department. And we have Nisimot Mazgin here, who leads Japanese studies at the Hebrew University, who's doing an excellent job in teaching, in research, in organization, and also his field of popular Japanese culture actually combines many other things like political science and foreign relations, and, so I think that's the ideal trend of the future. Nowadays we have 85 students undergraduate students who major in Japanese studies, 7 graduate students, 1 doctoral student, and we have also students abroad excellent students who are doing their PhDs abroad, which shows that we are not pessimistic about Japan, that despite what happened last year in Japan, we don't think the Japanese sun is setting. We are sure it will still rise again, and it's worthwhile to invest effort in this field. So I want to thank all the people who are doing their best to advance Japanese studies at the Hebrew University, but also all over Israel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Shiloni. Professor Yaakov Raz.
Good evening. I started my studies in Japanese studies as an orphan. There was no father, no mother, no professor who was specializing in Japanese studies. And something in that culture attracted me very much. And I asked about the faculty who is going to supervise me in the master's degree or in the doctorate degree, and there was no one. And I thank Professor Schaffstein from Tel Aviv University, who was wide enough in his thought and range of his beautiful site to supervise me, not in Japanese studies because he knew nothing about Japanese studies, but he knew something about studying and about researching and about thinking. And so I started as an orphan, but the father of my studies of Japanese studies was from another culture. Talking very shortly about the Department of East Asian Studies in Tel Aviv University, we are a huge department, maybe too large. We have about undergraduate, we have about 630 students, which might be the largest in the world. And it is the largest in humanities in Tel Aviv, and it is maybe the largest in the world. And we have another few dozens of masters and PhD students, and some of my ex-students are here, sitting here, and not all of them study Japanese studies. The majority is naturally mostly Chinese, but saying something about something that is not Japanese, we have, I think, the largest Sanskrit class in the world, which is about 25 people. And that's the largest in the world. And in Japanese studies, we have quite a large, it's not easy to count who is studying exactly Japanese studies, but we can count about the people who study the language and the seminars and so on, and the doctorates, the PhD people who want to study something about Japanese studies. And so I myself is a kind of an example of the wandering and the unstrategic way of looking at Japanese studies, because I started with aesthetics and art and theater and moved on to anthropology and Buddhism. And when I see the range of people whom I supervise to their PhD, it is a very attractive and very stimulating for me as a supervisor, and very romantic in a way, because the people take the whole range. And something I want to say about that range. When I see the classes that are given in our department, and the classes that are given in Haifa University, which we'll hear, I guess, in a few minutes, and the classes that are given at the Hebrew University, I see really a very complex and very rich range of subjects and focus of interests. some of them, something is there lacking for me, and my next words will be a kind of an invitation to go back to classics. Okay, people now are studying and researching and inquiring and doing studies, stimulating and exciting studies about modern Japanese politics and energy and anime and cellulose and so on, which are very, very exciting. I think when you're looking at the Japanese society, and the Japanese society is a kind of an organism, you can't ignore the popular science and the popular culture, the popular poetry and the popular literature that is going on, which is one of the most exciting in the world, I think. But there's some going away from the classics, and my invitation to would-be or wannabe researchers of next generation is go back to classics. When I'm looking back at my own work of translation and research and studies and so on, I look back also at the classic of Japanese history and Japanese literature and Japanese philosophy. And there's Kobo Daishi, and there's Dogen, and there's Ikkyu, and there are quite a few figures in Japanese literature and poetry and painting and arts and drama, which are neglected these days. So my invitation to wannabe or would-be researchers is to go back to classics without ignoring the exciting Japanese society of today. My next invitation is to method, to ways of looking at methodology. Looking at methodology, I'm looking at something that appeared in the 80s in the form of, some of you might know it, of a central article which was called Contextualism by Hamaguchi Eshun, which looked at the methodology of social studies in Japan and about Japan, coming from the Japanese assumptions and values and tradition, and they called it in Japanese kanjin shugi. Kanjin shugi is a word that does not exist in Japanese, but it is compound of kan, which is aida, and jin, which is hito, and it is a kind of improvisation on the word ningen, which is word and aida, man and aida, and they try to build a kind of methodology which is based on Japanese assumptions and not on Western assumptions which are imposed on Japanese studies. And this is an invitation I found very exciting for me as a researcher. I supervised a few studies of PhD students on Japanese philosophy and Japanese Buddhism and so on, and I challenged both myself and the PhD students to find the methodology within the text and not from, let's say, philology or something that is coming from outside, but something that is coming from the text itself. So this is my second second invitation. And my third invitation is to go back to looking at the Japanese society and Japanese culture as a kind of organism which looks for interdisciplinary study, and not from only history or only literature or only energy or only ecology and so on. And something that is just an example that I gave a few weeks ago in Tel Aviv is that when we're looking at the disaster that happened a year ago in Japan, this is a kind of a relation, something that points to the relationship between Japan as a society and its nature. Okay? We can look at it from all kinds of angles, but we can look at it from the point of view as a kind of ecology, but deep ecology, studies of a Japanese relationship with nature, which comes from philosophy and poetry and literature and energy and politics and industry and so on. This is a kind of invitation to look at something that is ironically very modern and very, very traditional. What I said in that event was that I found that there is a kind of discipline which is called deep ecology today. Deep ecology, the founder was a Norwegian philosopher called Arne Næss. Arne Næss. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing right, but he built a kind of a system of looking philosophically at the problems of ecology, and one of his main inspirations was Dogen. When you look at Dogen, at Dogen's philosophy, you find a deeply ecological philosophy in Dogen's thought. And you can find now a Norwegian today, a kind of modern Norwegian looking at the problems of ecology today, inspired by Dogen. While the Japanese themselves, excuse me for saying so, forgot the tradition of relationship with nature. They talk about it, they sell the merchandise of nature to others and to themselves, but something was forgotten on the way. And when you look at it as a kind of a challenge to research, it's one of the most exciting and most interdisciplinary researches that you can do when you look at the relationship, the deep relationship, the poetical, the literature, the philosophical, the industrial, the economical relationship between Japanese and the nature, which is just kind of an example. So this is some invitation that I put on the table now, and that's it. So thank you.
Thank you, Yaakov. And our third and last speaker, the last speaker in this round, is Professor Rotem Kovner from Haifa.
Thank you, Professor Amitai, for the kind introduction, and good evening. I would like to share with you several observations I have about the field here in Israel, the tremendous transformation and the tremendous transformation it has undergone in the last 20 years, and within this observation to locate the state of affairs in the University of Haifa. Well, the first, maybe most important observation is, I think, quite clear, is the spectacular expansion of Japanese studies in Israel in the last 20 years. And after the establishment of the department here in '69, Tel Aviv, it was in '95. In '97, there was the establishment of a cluster of Japanese studies at Haifa. And then in 2002, the department. Beginning it was East Asian studies, and later through the introduction of Indian studies, it became Asian studies. And I see that the Hebrew University is joining us in changing the name after 1 year opposition. And recently there was there are buds of Japanese studies in Bar-Ilan University, and next year going to be in Tel Hai, the beginning of a new department with the important contribution of Dr. Sarig. Where are you? Okay. And so I think this is an amazing change, and we would not sit here unless there was such a change. I mean, the department in Jerusalem was very important, and we cannot dismiss or not, I mean, can praise its contribution to all of us, and many of us are graduate or even with a PhD from that department, but the dimension of the field has changed tremendously since the last 20 years, and it was not so easy as it might seem now. The relations were always good, but on the official level, there was opposition to Tel Aviv, and there was opposition to Haifa, and in retrospect, I think that we should not, I mean, personally, I would not oppose any further expansion in view of the importance of what it made eventually. The second observation is the diversification of the field. We have many new topics now that we did not have 20 years ago. For example, literature. There was hardly anyone dealt with literature, cultural studies, law, popular culture, economy, media, theater. Theater. Of course, there was. So there are many. I mean, we have now much broader view of Japan, and I think that's a big change. Side by side, I think there is the beginning of certain specialization, and here I can locate Haifa. That from the beginning we decided to have clear emphasis or focus on modern studies. I mean, basically late or 20th century to present time, and it's not only the time, the period, but also what we teach, and it's meant to be more into political science. Not always we could have the people for that or the positions, but still economy, modern history, contemporary culture. So it was also a change a little from humanities into social sciences. Tel Aviv too had certain focus, even though they not always wanted to admit it. And at least in Chinese studies, Jerusalem has, in the last 10, 20 years, became quite a classical department, which fits very well into certain division of labor. And so I think this specialization is really a necessity in such a small country. The third observation is the rise of Chinese studies. Doesn't seem so relevant to our discussion, but in fact it's this is the big shadow here. Yuri is okay. So depends where is the sun. And in the evening it's a big shadow. And anyway, about 20 years ago, just before the establishment of the relation between the two states, two countries, let's say 1991, the number of students were about the same. And the reason it was about the same was, first of all, we could not enter China. Japan was the place you could go to further your studies. And then also, at that time at least, there was still expectation Japan is going to be the next thing. All this was several years later became, we could enter China, and China became the next big thing. And now the numbers are within the departments. It's only the question is whether it's 5-1 or 3-1. So basically, after quite a surge in the early 90s, we are now not only in a relative decline, but also in absolute decline, which it certainly makes us to think about our role and gives us a new perspective about our position. It also made us a certain response, which I would discuss. That's the next thing I would like to discuss. So the next observation is the consolidation, I would call it, of Japanese studies in Israel. And there has been, it's a long process, but at least kind of 10 years of more and more collaboration between the departments. It started with the Israeli meeting of Asian studies about 11 years ago. In fact, it's exactly 10 years ago. Now it's the 11th time, but it's going to be now the 10 years. And that meant much more communication and exchange, and often the discussion were within the Japanese studies. Then we had, in the last 10 years, a lot of conferences together, and I really thankful for the collaboration and cooperation of all of you in all those conferences here and in Tel Aviv and also in Haifa. But all these conferences were not so common before because there was only one department. And there was not so much to discuss. You could have it on coffee here in Beit Maesdorf. So suddenly we started to meet and discuss and bring scholars from abroad. Then we had this speech contest 3 years ago, and then the discussion, beginning of discussion about the national test, the Nihongo no Ryoku Shiken, and that's very much with the help of the embassy, and I'm very much, I would like to express my gratitude. This is not only now, it's for many years, but especially in recent years, we are very impressed, not only from the support, but also in the way it's done. And it's very helpful. Not so many regional studies are fortunate to have such support. And then eventually, 3 months ago, the establishment of the Israeli Association of Japanese Studies, which I think somehow ends this process of consolidation of something new. So just a few words about the prospects for the future. Despite all these positive developments, I would just remark that there is an insufficient number of tenure-track scholars, and I would not mention the numbers, but when you check each department, we are in a minority, and often the numbers are very limited and perhaps insufficient to really maintain true studies, and that's casts some doubt about our future capacity. So as the dean here sits and other dean, and we have close contacts, we should constantly pursue and try to acquire, to obtain more additional positions. What we are failing is in having our members getting into a non-regional studies department. Apart from anthropology, we hardly have anyone in just, let's say, in law or in economics and other departments. That's something we should have pursued harder. We may discuss in the future having at least certain graduate program together in a certain way, and now it's quite easy with distance learning or some other possibility, because in fact, altogether we have a wonderful department. I mean, if we were together and just refer to us as several campuses, we have here an amazing department, one single department, let's say even two. But the way it is now, we should think about something better than that. Another deficient side is the libraries, and we don't have still sufficient number of, the collections of Japanese language collections are limited. There is a big change in the last several years in all the libraries, but still, in order to make something serious, we always have to go abroad, and this is something Japan Foundation may help, and some databases that will be more than what we have now, but it's also some new beginning. Another direction is having a research cooperation with Japan. There is this year a new research cooperation with China. It's like we have it with the United States and Germany, the German-Israeli Foundation. There is going to be now with China each year $10 million for research, Israelis and Chinese. We should have the same thing with Japan. And this is government issue more, but again, this is another direction. So in conclusion, there has been tremendous change in the last 20 years, and clearly I thank the Hebrew University for the beginning, but we are keeping the baton and running farther, but we still have a long way to go, and we need to work hard and together to achieve it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reuven. I'll just make a couple comments. I can allow myself, and then, it's clear that there'll have to be more positions, and we fully intend to make more positions, certainly here at the Hebrew University, and to work it into our development program. I fully agree that many of them, I don't have to say all of them, but many of them should be joint appointments within the Faculty of Humanities and elsewhere. In the university. They're not always easy to arrange, but they can be done if you find the right people. They have to be good in two fields. They have to be good in Japanese studies, and they have to be good in their home discipline, so to speak. But we should aspire, and I can say that that's certainly a possibility here at this university. I think the idea of a joint graduate program would be a wonderful idea, and I fully will endorse it and do what I can to help. I think that we don't have to come from this room, but the deans will be firmly behind you, and indeed it could create one of the best programs in Japanese studies in the world, certainly outside of Japan. The synergy that's available, and the people who are coming up the ranks, and some of the people who will be getting jobs in the next few years. There's no doubt that a joint graduate program, together with extended visits in Japan for language training and research, it can create really wonderful opportunities. And just want to do other things. I fully agree with Yaakov that the basis of all knowledge of any region, any part of the world, and Japan is no different here, is a firm grounding in history, traditional culture, and on those foundations, you build all kinds of other interesting things, including modern concerns, of course. But if somebody with good knowledge of culture and history will be a great political scientist, a great scholar of modern literature, a great scholar of modern culture, et cetera, et cetera. Specialization is interesting. I don't know if the people were to get, the specialists, if Japan and the Departments of Asian Studies were to get together and sort of allocate or together, that might work. It's clear that everybody in BA needs certain things, but not every university needs specialists in every field. I just want to note for the record that we just made a new appointment, as you know, in modern Chinese society, and with all of our proud and we're very, very proud of our emphasis on traditional Chinese society and culture in this university, but without neglecting modern aspects too. Well, perhaps before we do another round or open it up, Professor Garon, would you like to say something, contribute as a friendly outsider? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be here, and I've really enjoyed the past few days. And I never thought I could meet an entire field of Japanese studies, and I did. And it's not because there's only 2 people. There are many of you, and it's really been a pleasure. And I've seen the great diversity of Japanese studies just in my couple days here. I'm officially listed as a greeter. I've never been a greeter before, so I'm going to take my cue from greeters in Tokyo department stores, and I know that they don't require 10 minutes, so I'm going to be very brief. It's also a pleasure to be here on the inauguration of your Association of Japanese Studies, and I think it was Reuven who said to me, 100 years ago, German social scientist Zombart, who wrote an essay, "Why No Socialism in America?" And Reuven jogged me to think, why no Japanese Studies Association in America? Because we don't have one. We actually do all of our professional association work through an association of Asian studies, which includes everywhere from East Asia to even West Asia. And it is interesting that we don't tend to think that way in America. We do have a journal of Japanese studies, but no association. And so it does, I guess, maybe in keeping with my theme of transnational, sometimes you have to go somewhere else to realize how abnormal you are. And I've come to Israel. There are a lot of Japanese studies associations around the world, unlike the United States and Australia, Britain, obviously all of Europe, and now in Israel. And it is interesting why things are organized differently in America. I think one of the reasons is resources. Maybe actually all 3 or 4 reasons are resources. We have a lot of resources, and the way we got the resources originally in the late 1950s was actually through something called the National Defense Foreign Language Act, which was a post-Sputnik thing. And it set up area studies. Area studies was really lavishly funded, and we set up area studies programs. And in a sense, we've stuck with that organization. So maybe that's one reason. But another reason, I suppose, is the resources within our universities. And Reuven also jogged me a few minutes ago to think that maybe the Princeton University by itself may have almost as many people. And that's interesting because what resources do in America, they do a lot of great things. We can we have, you know, extensive Japanese language. We have wonderful fellowship funding at a lot of the universities. But partly because we have so many resources, in a sense, we don't tend to collaborate that much across universities. And maybe it's the good part of the bad part. You don't have many resources, and I heard the negatives expressed as well as the positives, but it does seem to have led to some healthy collaboration. And I think maybe one more benefit of the way that you have organized in terms of Japanese studies is this is dawning on me as I meet various faculty members and students here, that there is a pattern in the rich American universities that we tell our students, do most of your study in our university. You go to Japan for a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Don't stay too long. We tell them to come back and we'll educate you. And it's maybe not the healthiest attitude, because I can see, in a sense, because you don't have the resources and because you're thinking in terms of Japanese studies, that in some ways I think many of you have a much more intimate relationship with Japan than many of us who, you know, were educated in-house in American universities. I think you spend longer in Japan. You have the benefits of Japanese universities and maybe getting to know Japanese students and colleagues maybe better than some of us do in the wealthy American institutions. Well, there's always pluses and minuses in every configuration, and all I want to say at this point is it's just been a real pleasure to be here and to meet all of you, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Garon. I just want to note something. There was a Princeton connection mentioned earlier. Well, I'm from Philadelphia, which is next door to Princeton, so there must be some connection. I don't know. I did a postdoc at Princeton too. But anyway, I just one other point. I think that it's been hinted at here before. We're Asian studies in Israel, of which Japanese studies is one of the backbone or one of the backbones. If you can have more than one backbone, but Asian studies is expanding, and it's expanding in terms of the amount of students, the amount of faculty, the subjects that are covered, the disciplines that are covered, and the areas too. But I think we have to think beyond Japan and China. I think it's very important. Korea, of course, and India, of course, and Southeast Asia, which is a world in itself. And let's not forget Inner Asia for a second, Mongolia and the Turkish republics, and elsewhere Tibet and where else. So I think this is part of the process. The formation of the Association of Japanese Studies is part of that process. So why don't we again do another very, very quick round? If any of you have couple comments to make, we can, and then if we have time, we can open it up to questions and comments from the audience. Ami?
One of the main problem, of course, is positions. As our dean knows, it's very nice to talk about all kinds of fields that we have to develop and this and that sort, but at the end, it comes to positions. Now, on the one hand, you can see that we have so many teachers, you know, young, bright people presenting papers here. And then if you think, how many positions do we have in our department in Japanese studies after Ehud retired, after I retired? You know, one. In that position. All the others are part-time jobs.
But he's a world in himself.
He's one of 3 or 4. He's one of 3 or 4. But I think we need more positions. We have excellent candidates. The problem is, if you open another position, the competition will be so great.
Well, that's very good.
Choose the best one.
That's very good.
Still, we need more positions. Now, once we have this position, no problem at all, because all these young, bright people, they can teach many things, and even if you have heard, like of Rastat and Japanese theater and to Buddhism, it's very easy to emphasize all kinds of things. But I hope the dean that is so much interested in Asia, Central Asia, that you know, is connected with all of Asia. You mentioned the Mongols,
No doubt about it.
who attacked Japan and were defeated there, and then came to the Gaza Strip. By the way, they were defeated in the Gaza Strip, you know. Again, it's very interesting. And also in Harod, and then they continued to Gaza, but the furthest place that they were defeated were in Gaza. So I hope that we'll be able, and maybe the same problem in other universities too, you know, that the university administration will recognize the great need to allocate more positions to Japanese studies. And I think one of the purposes of this new association that we are establishing today is to push for that, and, you know, not to rest until Japanese studies get more positions in Israel.
I suggest you lock the dean in a closet until he agrees. No, seriously, I expect that the situation will be somewhat better in the next few years. I obviously will not, at this point, reveal all my plans, but I think that by the end of the summer they will be more obvious, more clear, and I think the Department of Asian Studies, and I appreciate very much the change in the name, and the sub-department of Japanese Studies will have a sense of satisfaction where we're going, and I think that's great that there are a lot of people competing. We just have, just to give you an example, in our philosophy, we're having this year a job hunt in philosophy, 30 people. Religious studies, 25 people. I think that's the way we can. We'll settle for 10 or 15, but it doesn't look good when you have a job hunt and 3 people apply. And I'm sure that when the time comes for Japanese culture and history and society and however we define it, Japanese studies, there'll be lots of people, and that's the way it should be, and we can pick the really good people. Yeah. Yaakov.
First, I agree with Professor Sheldon, and the words are going directly to the ears of Japanese ambassador and Japan Foundation. And onegaishimasu. The next thing, very short, is that I really would encourage collaboration of graduate studies, co-supervision, because we are complementary of the 3 universities. So very much encourage, and it's a personal dialogue that can encourage that.
As I said, it's something that the beginnings of it are bilateral graduate, usually MA programs, but I think that if the 3 departments were to consider a graduate program from beginning of MA to the end of the PhD, that it would enjoy the full support and encouragement of all the 3 deans, and I think it would enjoy the support of the Vatat and the Malag and everybody else, and the administrations, and the result would be a great program, a world-class program. I mean, it's already world-class, but it'd be super world-class, Reuven.
I would like just to add first of all, I agree with my teachers, but I would like to add another element to the future prospects, which may complement the discussion yesterday. We are still somehow learn Japan in isolation. True that we are part of departments these days, and often the departments are, you have to study about China, and even in our case about India, but we concentrate on Japan. And I would like to connect Japan to the rest of the world, and to think also about some programs which would collaborate within each university with other fields, whether it's history, could be transnational history, could be also in political science, and use Japan as another case study for other disciplines, and in this way to strengthen also our field within the universities. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we have some great comments. I would like to open, we have a few minutes. We're scheduled till 8, and I don't intend to be a minute after 8, but we have 15 minutes. Yes, please.
My name is Sigal Ben-Ofer Garanti, and I am from Bilateral College. I had the social science department already 6 years. First, I thank you very much for this conference, for this celebration, etc. I would like to make a very small comment without getting on the nerves of anyone. I hope that next time we would see more women on the panel. Secondly, on this occasion, I would like to enlarge maybe what Reuven has touched a little bit, that it is already, I'm saying it all the time, but it is very, very important for me at least, and for many people who are here and are part of this, already 19 years that Japan Studies has gone out of the walls of the conventional universities. And in public, it is taught in different departments, in public colleges. I'm not talking about the private colleges, but in public colleges. And there is another profile of students who are studying courses in Japan Studies, mostly lower class students from lower socioeconomic and also Arab students. And the only place where you have a mass of Arab students even who study Japanese study. But though asking for some help and trying to have contact with the embassy, we have never had any replies, any ambassador coming to see us teaching such classes, and it is a pity, because myself and my colleagues, we have made applications, we were never replied to this, and on this occasion I hope that maybe we can see an ambassador coming and helping, and I hope that even the new association could make once a conference in such a college, and maybe to tie together the bonds between these departments and what we are doing in the public colleges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, I could very easily say, since I wasn't part of the organization and I'm not in Japanese studies, well, somebody, at least for once, nobody's angry at me. But I fully appreciate your points, and both with regard to the role of the colleges and, of course, the gender imbalance here on the table. That's why it's not really a round table. Next time, well, certainly, I'm sure that the organizers will take that into account. Yes, any other comments? Ehud.
Sigal, being a young scholar, she spoke about the future. Me being an old-timer, maybe I'll add some historical point to the development of the Department of East Asian Studies. I was surprised to hear that from Reuven that it's difficult nowadays to have other departments except the Japan specialists and East Asian specialists. Is that what you said? Right, okay. Well, you may not know, but the way the Department of East Asian Studies was established in Yale University was what I call a foot in the door. We were admitted to the East Asian department because we were admitted to the other departments. Benami, history, political science, Shifrin, sociology, and the list goes on and on. So I don't know what happened.
Well, actually, I can say, first of all, how did you put it in the open door? It almost sounds like something in 19th century diplomatic history in East Asia. I have to say that certainly it's just now we're beginning to see warming up with our colleagues down the corridor. Basically, for years, it's been virtually impossible to make joint appointments for, I think, mostly technical reasons, but we're getting over that. And I hope that if we have harbingers now, and harbingers of better tidings, and I look forward to that. And we are open to suggestions, but they have to be coordinated way ahead of time. It's not something somebody in May says, and by the way, so-and-so can also be in geography or something like that, or so-and-so can be in economics or something like that. It has to be planned out from the very, very beginning. The dean has to know about it, and he has to coordinate it with the other dean. And of course, it's it's a problem that works its way through the committees, and it's not at all an easy thing, but it can be done. I think appointments in general were easier when you were young, 10, 20 years ago, but whenever. Yes. Yes, please. Yuri first, okay?
Yeah, I would want to follow up with Ehud's comment, and I think that we have a paradoxical situation. On the one hand, really, the Japanese studies are extremely popular, despite what Reuven said. Yes, we have no phenomenal class of 600 people, but still there are much more people attending classes of Japanese history than of any European country, and I think that more than the entire European countries together. So it's still not bad, I would say. I think that we have excellent events. We really enjoy together. We have huge attendance in our conferences and cultural events, etc. However, we really lost in the placing ourselves as part of legitimate academic discipline within the social sciences, which we completely were much. The social sciences abandoned us. I think that after Ehud left political sciences and Shihor left political sciences, there is no longer political sciences involved in anything with dealing with Asia. No longer foreign relations department has nothing to do with Asia now, etc., etc., etc. Now, I would not say that unlike in Tel Aviv, where I think they are more advanced, in the Hebrew University, even philosophy department never engaged anything beyond Greco-Roman German philosophies.
Arab philosophy.
Arab philosophy is recognized now by philosophy.
Yeah,
great. I really admire, but I think that this is actually one of the dangers of our great joy together. When we enjoy so much our events, when we can speak some Japanese or some Chinese, and when we enjoy so much our close community, we abandon the field of defining general sciences, especially the social sciences, which are completely overwhelmingly anglicized. Those who are dealing with languages outside English are much less important now in social sciences, but even in history, after Benami left the Department of History. I think that we should strive not only be recognizable among the students. We are so popular among the students, but be recognizable among our colleagues, among our leaders, and to redefine the fields. So the Japanese history is no less important in the Department of History than German history, with all due respect to German. Thank you.
Okay. Well, first of all, as Yuri, as you know, at least the current dean recognizes the importance of Asian history. And non-Western history, without denying the importance of Western history and Jewish history. He sees certainly Asia as one of the legs in which we base one of the foundations of our faculty. But I think it's a complicated process which has happened. I don't think I have to be very frank. Having looked at this process for 20 years, almost 20 years, 15, 16, 17 years that I've been involved in administrative type things since I was head of the Department of Middle Eastern Studies, and which, by the way, I was always trying with cooperation with Asian studies. But I look at our colleagues in social science have drawn away from area studies, and they become highly theoretical. And we have to continue. We have to engage them. We have to engage them, and we have to say, you guys, it's obviously. One has to deal with reality on the ground of Asia and Latin America and Africa and Europe, of course, and North America. And the only way you can do that is by expertise in language and culture, and not just in theory. And this is our big argument with our colleagues in social science. And we say theory is important, but so is language and culture and history. And therefore. Well, then that's the other thing. One is our experience, and two is the other theory too. So obviously but it's an ongoing process. And again, the important thing is to make sure we have the best possible people who can meet everybody's standards, and we don't have to make any compromises and say it's important. Therefore, it may not be a great sociologist, but he knows Japanese well. That's not enough. We have to have great sociologists who also know Japanese very, very well and know something about Japanese culture and history. Yes, go. Would you like to say something?
Mr. Amitai and the honorable panel. Is there any comparison between the university and university outputs and other universities in the West Bank? And how about the number of Palestinian students who don't hold this residency that had a chance to visit Japan on scholarship?
All right, I will just answer that. There isn't a lot going on now there's some things with Al-Quds. With the West Bank, other West Bank universities, virtually nothing on institutionalized level. There may be individual contexts until the political reality, the political situation picks up, and I'm not holding my breath. But that's probably not much is going to happen. I have a feeling that when things do happen, Asian studies is not going to be at the top of the list. But maybe I'm wrong. So that's regarding that. With regard to students of of modest means who study, all these scholarships are open. And if one thing good has happened at the Hebrew University, and our colleagues from the other universities can respond maybe and say what parallel things, there's been all kinds of problems in the last decade or two, and we're all kind of still reeling from what's happened here and the cuts and we're all much smaller than we were 10, 12 years ago. All the universities are smaller, the faculties of humanities are smaller, etc. For every 2 people who retired, we got one position. I can go on and on and on and on, and things have just kind of leveled out. And we're beginning to look up, and we're beginning to see not even the light at the end of the tunnel, we're beginning to see the halo of the light at the end of the tunnel, and we can, for the first time, I'm not saying we can be optimistic, but at least we can be a little bit less pessimistic in general. One good thing happened at the Hebrew University in the Faculty of Humanities in the last 10 years, and there was an increase of funding for graduate students. And that's continuing through not the least of the Mandel Initiative too. So, and I don't know if that similar things happened at the other universities. So any first-rate university from first-rate student from Asian studies who applies for a President's Scholarship, all the other scholarships that float around, has a great chance. Why not? And that I don't think. I think we're aware, and I think that there are certain mechanisms that we can apply to those students who come from, who have modest means, in Asian studies and everywhere else. Yes, please, Mr. Ambassador.
Well, I feel obliged to respond to that lady first. One of the reasons why we haven't been able to probably accept your invitations. Well, personally, I haven't been invited yet, so we can extend your invitation now. There are many requests from schools and so forth, and our staff is limited, so probably that's one of the reasons why we could not, at the time of the request, respond to your request. But our door is open any time, and we have our culture to share. Yeah, we can speak to you later on. As regards the scholarships to the Palestinians, we have been offering for the past 10 years 3 scholarships every year. So not many specializing in humanities, mostly economy and science, but and they come from Bill Zayt University and Quds University, and some from Gaza as well. I think the past couple of years, mostly from the West Bank. And come back to you 3. Well, it was very interesting idea to coordinate and to have a joint program for graduate students, which in other words means that there hasn't been any coordination so far. So, and now 3 universities are competing with each other, and I think each university has its own say or whatever. And I don't think all of you are competing with each other to have staff in every aspect of Japanese studies. So if there's going to be a coordination, then probably it would be a good idea also for you to discuss in what areas you might invest your manpower, your resources, and so that you can complement.
Thank you very much. Well, we're at 8 o'clock, and frankly, that was the best possible summation that one could ask for. So thank you. So I think I'd like to first of all thank the ambassador and thank Professor Garon, and I'd like to thank our friends from the Japanese Embassy and everybody else who's here, and of course our speakers and from the Japan Foundation. And I understand that tomorrow you have a full day of activities. So I wish you all very well tomorrow and an interesting, and I almost said interesting like in Philadelphia, but I caught myself. Interesting and fruitful discussions tomorrow. Good evening.